Who are the best offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators in the NFL today? What's going on, football fans? It's Mitch here, back with another NFL reaction video. And in this video, I react to PFF's top 10 coordinators on offense and defense in the NFL entering 2024. That's right, they released these lists on Instagram. I have yet to see these lists. This is a raw reaction to the top 10 offensive coordinators and top 10 defensive coordinators in the sport. Now, it's important to understand that, yes, there are plenty of play callers that are head coaches, right? Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDonald, an example on offense and defense. But these guys are removed from the discussion. These are coordinators, strictly OCs and DCs making the list, not play callers. Okay? Now that we understand, Gronk spike the like button to show your support, and if we get 100 likes on this video, I will rank the top 32 coordinators in the NFL on both offense and defense. So essentially, the top 32 assistant coaches in the game. And why it's important to understand who these guys are is your favorite team might be hiring one of these individuals very soon, because these are the guys that are looked at as future head coaches in the sport. Let's break it down, guys. Let's react to the top 10 defensive coordinators and then the top 10 offensive coordinators. Okay. So we have Steve Spagnuolo as the cover artist, the cover coach. We'll go with that, okay? Let's begin. So, Steve Spagnuolo and Vic Fangio are number 1 and number 2 on defense. Steve Spagnuolo, number 1, I think that's obvious. I think that's clear. Steve Spagnuolo is that never going to be head coach again that has found his way to a very successful team. He coaches under Andy Reid. He just coaches his defense, and he has a ton of fun with it, and he's excellent at his job. There are few defensive coordinators that are better in big spots than Steve Spagnuolo in the history of the NFL. We're talking about the biggest games ever. Super Bowls, playoff matchups, taking on the greatest quarterbacks, the greatest offenses we have ever seen, the greatest play callers we have ever seen. This guy has defeated Tom Brady. This guy has defeated a Kyle Shanahan offense multiple times. This guy has defeated the best of the best in the biggest games. And he is, in my opinion, the catalyst of the Chief dynasty. Yes, Patrick Mahomes is the star. Yes, Andy Reid is probably the leader, but the catalyst is the defensive coordinator. Why? In 2018, I believe his name was Sutton, was the defensive coordinator. He was awful. And the Chiefs had a historic level offense. They lost to the Patriots in New England in the AFC Championship. The next year, they hired Steve Spagnuolo. From that point on, they have been in the Super Bowl pretty much every season. They've missed out one time, I believe, in that entire span since they hired Steve Spagnuolo. They've won 3 Super Bowls. They've been to 4. His defense has rose to the occasion each and every time, and especially now he's coming off probably his best season since his Giants days. So Steve Spagnuolo, phenomenal coach, versatile, adaptable with the league, with his personnel, and a big game play caller and schemer. So certainly number 1. Now, I disagree with number 2. I don't think Vic Fangio is number 2. I think there's an argument that Vic Fangio is like even a bottom half coordinator. Last year, I mean, the Miami defense, he did a good job for the most part in terms of how they resulted, like how the results came through for Miami. But the team fired him for a reason. And I think it was somewhat to do with his outdated approach with his players, his personality, his ability to relate to his players. And I think some of it had to do with maybe Mike McDaniel wasn't a huge fan of how he schemed it up. Because we've seen in recent years, I mean, Fangio didn't fare well as a head coach in Denver. His defenses were pretty good. They weren't special, but they were pretty good. In Chicago, he was phenomenal. He was probably the peak of his career, right? He was great in San Francisco before that, I believe. But in Miami, it's one of his worst seasons he's coming off of his career. And now he has one of the biggest tasks of his career to turn this thing around in Philadelphia, right? They were horrible at the end of last year. So I think Fangio is certainly overrated. Would he be on my top 10? Probably. But I think there's Dolphins fans that would argue that he was like not even a top half of the league coordinator last year. So he's a big name. He's a legend. But in terms of right now, defensive coordinator and play calling, I don't think he's at his peak or even close. I would not have him number 2. That's just my opinion. Let's see who's next on the list. At number 3, we have Jim Schwartz and Brian Flores at number 4. I like these 2 entries here, and I'd have them both above Vic Fangio pretty easily. First of all, with Jim Schwartz, he led the number 1 defense in the NFL last year. He's a very adaptable coach, in my opinion, to different personnel. He understands what his personnel does well, and he really, really hones in on that and presses the right buttons each and every time. It doesn't matter where he's at. Detroit as a head coach and a defensive guy, Philadelphia, right, on their Super Bowl team, or now Cleveland. Like, this guy has consistently done his thing as a defensive coordinator, a defensive-minded guy, especially in the last 10 to 15 years. So Jim Schwartz, to me, he turned that Browns defense around. They always had talent, but they didn't have the coaching, and Schwartz gave them that coaching that they desperately needed. I think what he also does really well is he's really good with defensive lines. He gets the most out of elite defensive linemen. So you think about Philadelphia with Fletcher Cox in his prime. You think of the Lions with Ndamukong Suh, Nick Fairley, right, in their prime. You think of the Cleveland Browns now with Myles Garrett, Darius Smith, and others, and Jim Schwartz has been a dog. So I'd have him number 2, number 3 on the list. Brian Flores, I think, is the best with the least. Brian Flores is one of the most creative in the sport. His ability to take, whoever it may be with whatever he has and make them better is a work of art. And I think he's a great motivator. I think he's got a great mentality and aura to him. He's got a toughness that he brings to his unit, and I think he was amazing in New England. He was better than Patricia. He instantly got hired as a head coach, and that kind of sucked, right, for New England. But in Miami, I thought he was a very underrated head coach, and that kind of spiraled out of control because of the relationship with the ownership and maybe him not being the biggest fan of Tua. But I feel like Flores, right now with Minnesota, he just did things with that unit that no one expected last year. He made them so much better than anyone would have thought, right? And his ability to blitz the daylights out of people and then also at the same time drop 8 more than anyone in football. It's such a unique combination. I feel like he's such a good, timely play caller. So for me, Flores, number 4, definitely, I think he's top 3. Lou Anarumo, Big Lou, Big Game Lou, at number 5. I don't hate it. I kind of want to see who's after these 2, but I think both of these guys deserve to be on the list here. Lou Anarumo and Evero of the Carolina Panthers. I think that Evero is one of the more underrated coordinators in the league in terms of what he did at Denver, what he's done in Carolina. The Carolina unit doesn't always statistically look phenomenal, but I feel like they always perform above their talent level and above their heads, let's say. Last year, they were great in pass defense, and I think that's kind of his calling is pass defense, pass coverage, sometimes the flexibility, creativity with, his simulated pressures at times, but also I think more so coverage. I think he's really good with coverages. He doesn't play, I think, too elaborate of a style, but they just play fundamentally sound, and they're always on their P's and Q's. And I think Carolina's defense from a pass coverage standpoint was much above what they were expected to be. So, yeah, Evero is a good coverage coordinator. Now we look at Lou, who's proven to be a big game coordinator, a big game planner. Again, a catalyst for Cincinnati. I feel like without him being so good on the defensive side, I feel like Zach Taylor would have a lot more questions, because Zach Taylor is strictly an offensive coach. He doesn't really have a lot of experience with defense. He's not very, adaptable in that mold. So to have somebody reliable like Lou, who's kind of like Spags-like, where nobody really treats him as if he's a head coaching candidate, but he is really good on his defensive side of the ball. He brings up creative stuff, like whether it be against Derrick Henry and the Titans in the run game to stop Derrick Henry, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and Travis Kelce in big games. He comes up with, different coverages and just a couple things to trick them, like 3-man rushes, dropping 8, or like containing, or the way that he'll send, the occasional blitz with Mike Hilton off the edge, things like that, where I think that he suffered last year. The defense was not very good. They had injuries across the board. His safeties were pretty rough. I think he does need good safeties to run his scheme effectively because of the versatility he wants his coverages to play. I like him because he plays and mixes in zones. He mixes in mans. He mixes in 8. He mixes in 7 drops, 4-man rush, 3-man rush. Simulated looks, no simulated looks. Like, he's very versatile in his approach, and I think that's something that you never really know what you're going to get from him on a weekly basis. So I definitely think that overall he's definitely top 10 and probably top 5. It's just that last year his defense kind of suffered. At number 7, Gus Bradley. I'd probably not have Gus Bradley on my list. Gus Bradley, he's probably on this list because he's well known, but honestly, like, Gus Bradley has not really produced a great defense in a while. Like, his defenses with the Raiders were like bad to average, right? They're actually improved now thanks to a change in coaching. And Mike Zimmer at number 8, I definitely think should be on this list. Mike Zimmer, despite not being around, is just a great defensive coordinator. I don't know how many seasons as a head coach or a defensive coordinator that he's had like less than a top 10 defense. So he's a very good defensive coordinator, and he's well known for his blitz looks, especially the double A gap looks, right? Very good with that. Also really good with, I feel like, aggressive press coverages and bigger corners. There's a lot of things when you know what a defensive coordinator is looking for in their defense and the specific players that kind of come to mind, it's probably a good defense. Like, that's what I feel about with Mike Zimmer. He hasn't been around for a while, but I think he's going to upgrade the defense in terms of the run defense of the Cowboys. The coverage and the creativity that Dan Quinn brought, I feel like is going to be a little bit less, but I think they're going to play more fundamentally sound, and I think that's going to allow the Cowboys to thrive again on defense in 2024. Like I said with Gus Bradley, I just think he's too simple. Cover 3, cover 1, sometimes quarters, like, nothing too elaborate, doesn't blitz. He has like the lowest rate of blitzing in the NFL. I don't love him. He's good with the run game, but otherwise I feel like he's a little bit outdated. So I wouldn't have him on this list personally. At number 9 and 10, we've got Patrick Graham, who I would put higher. This is somebody I was looking for a little bit higher. I think what he did last year with the Raiders is extremely impressive. Nobody expected the Raiders defense to be like any good at all. So I would say that having a top 10 scoring defense and a top, even yardage defense, they weren't so bad. Like, Patrick Graham, bend but don't break to a certain degree, but with only really Max Crosby to work with in terms of all-stars, I think he did a great job with that defense. He just always seems to have like the right approach in every game. Sometimes it doesn't always work because the personnel isn't always there to complement it, but it feels like every time he plays an opponent, he understands what to take away, what to make them struggle with, what they should attack on defense against the opposing offense, what to force them to do and what not to force them to do. You know what I mean? So Patrick Graham is very, very good in that regard. And I think, coming from a New England base of scheme and kind of adapting that throughout the years has been pretty interesting. But yeah, I think his defenses, even with the Giants, were not half bad. I just think at times they kind of were underwhelming from a personnel standpoint. But with the Raiders, I'm really looking forward to his defense this year with the new additions and Christian Wilkins being added. That's really, really interesting. At number 10, Terrell Austin of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I wouldn't say that Terrell Austin is necessarily bad. I wouldn't say that he's necessarily great. I think he's okay. I think he's fine. I think that a lot of the Steelers defense is kind of like almost like institutional knowledge. Like, I feel like Terrell Austin, I think he was in Detroit previously, and I wasn't blown away by his defenses in Detroit. But I would say that I think in Pittsburgh, like, he's been able to take what he does well and then also what Mike Tomlin wants to do, and then use TJ Watt, use Alex Highsmith, use the guys that he has at his disposal and work that into what he likes on defense. So I feel like he's really solid. Top 10's debatable, I feel like, but the defense is always good in Pittsburgh, so it just feels like this is kind of like an easy pick because the Pittsburgh defensive coordinator has usually an easy job because they usually have like generational players, but he definitely doesn't mess it up. I will say that. This is a big year for him, though. If he can really prove that he can take this unit to a top 5 finish overall, I'd feel like he definitely deserves his placement, which the expectations for this defense, given the pass rush it has and some of the players like Minkah Fitzpatrick and Porter, they should definitely be in that conversation. So a number 10, I don't mind it. I think the ones that I would remove are probably Gus Bradley and Vic Fangio would be lower for sure. Evero might be a little bit lower. I think Zimmer and Graham would be a little bit higher. Let's just check the CBS list just to see if I'm missing anybody, just for guys that could potentially replace. So some of these guys are new. Like, we don't really know how good they will be as coordinators. And there overall isn't a ton of choices. Like Vance Joseph, I like Vance Joseph. I like Aaron Glenn. Those guys I would consider for the list. I'm intrigued by Jeff Hafley. He's new to the Packers, obviously not a lot of experience. Ryan Nielsen not being on the list, I think, is an absolute joke. He should definitely be on the list. Again, Anthony Weaver is new. Jesse Minter is new. Chris Shula is new. DeMarcus Covington is new. I like Covington as a coach, though. He's been in New England for a long time. Joe Woods is terrible. Shane Bowen would be on my list, probably. Steve Wilkes is fired. This is a little bit older, but this is in 2024, so just not all the way updated. But I would say that I would take Austin out, maybe Bradley out, maybe even Evero out. I think Vance Joseph, maybe not, but it's debatable. Nielsen should definitely be in the list. There's no question about that. And I think Shane Bowen should also definitely be in the list. Those are two guys I would definitely have in there. And I don't know if there's anyone else that I'm missing. Yeah. Let's move on to offense now with the top 10 offensive coordinators in the NFL. At number 1, we have Ben Johnson of the Lions. Of course, guys, remember, no Sean McVay, right? No Matt LaFleur. No Kyle Shanahan. These are strictly offensive coordinators, right? So Ben Johnson at number 1, that's the right choice. Ben Johnson, I think, was like the second best play caller in football last year besides Kyle Shanahan. So the guy's awesome. Love his run game. Love his ability to set that up through play action. I love the multi-layered approach. I thought his game plan against the Niners was a work of art. He constantly had Steve Wilkes on like his toes. It was absolutely phenomenal the way he called the game that game. I think Ben Johnson is awesome. He had an incredible playoffs. I'd be hiring this guy as my head coach, 100%. Ben Johnson is a wizard-level offensive coordinator. Todd Monken, I think, is overrated. I think he deserves to be on the list. Don't get me wrong. Maybe even top 5, depending on the rest of the names on this list. I'm not exactly sure. But number 2, I thought he had an absolutely dreadful AFC Championship. He overall got out-coached in both playoff games. I thought DeMeco Ryans out-coached him for at least 2 to 3 quarters in that first game. And I feel like, the only reason they kind of took over is just Lamar's individual talent and the individual talent they have in Baltimore. And then in the AFC Championship, the Chiefs, Steve Spagnuolo took him to the woodshed. So to me, like, Todd Monken, definitely overrated. I think that his passing game and the way that he utilized Lamar's skill set for quick passing and things like that, he definitely helped Lamar in the passing game. I think that the run game has gotten a little bit worse with Monken compared to Greg Roman. I think Roman is stronger in that area, but I think that Monken is better in terms of the overall offensive vision, overall passing game, drop back passing game, play action, things like that. I think he's good. I just don't think he's number 2 in the league. At number 3, Bobby Slowick is my favorite up-and-coming coordinator. I think last year, people give him maybe a little bit more credit than he deserves. I felt like he was a little bit too run-heavy. But I think the things that he did in terms of his play action, his condensed splits, he's setting vibes. He's setting trends at this offensive coordinator and offensive play calling in terms of what he's doing with receivers specifically and how he's using them and how he's moving them around and how he's putting them in certain formations, right? The crossers and things like that they were utilizing last year with CJ Stroud. I think a lot of their success was Stroud. But I also feel like Slowick did a phenomenal job, especially upgrading Nico Collins, Tank Dell, their game specifically, making the receivers so much better. Kellen Moore has consistently been overrated. There's a reason he was fired multiple times. So yeah, Kellen Moore is not the number 4 offensive coordinator in the NFL. I just feel like with Kellen Moore, he has an overall good vision for offense. I think he has a pretty good balanced approach with run game, pass game. I like how he utilizes under center and the gun. I mostly like, his overall offense. I just feel like in terms of play calling, he is not that next level gifted in terms of sequencing. He doesn't tie things together. He doesn't really have like a vision for the game in terms of like Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, how they'll layer plays on top of each other and how that will approach a defense and attack a defense. Like, he just misses that element to me in his offensive play calling. I would probably not even have him on this list or very low, but we'll see what he's able to do with an absolutely loaded Eagles offensive personnel. At number 5, Arthur Smith. I'm glad that he's on the list. I think Arthur Smith is a very good offensive coordinator, especially in the run game. He is not a good head coach. He doesn't have the personality for it, but as an offensive coordinator, he was excellent in Tennessee. He was mostly good as a play caller in Atlanta. It was just that fantasy people were kind of upset with him with Bijan. But outside of that, like with what he had at quarterback, Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder, he produced about as well as anybody could. I mean, so like he does really good with offensive lines, really good with run games, really good with play actions. I really like how he complements especially very strong defenses and kind of ball control teams. I think that he's good with that, and he's very elite in that area. So I would say that he is definitely top 5 in my opinion. Shane Waldron, I think, I've never viewed him as like a top 10 play caller. I think he's meh. I don't know. Like he's Sean McVay light, sort of. He was in Seattle. Now he's in Chicago. He's gonna probably have more success in Chicago given the quarterback and the personnel and the receivers that he has at his disposal. But honestly, I felt like it was underwhelming last year in Seattle. So that's probably what's giving me a bad vibe about Shane Waldron, is that just, I feel like they've had so much talent in Seattle and he hasn't really truly taken advantage of it. Now, what he did with Geno was special, but I also give Dave Canales a lot of credit for that as well. So at number 6, Shane Waldron, don't really agree with that one. At number 7, Joe Brady. I loved Joe Brady early in Carolina, and I loved Joe Brady in Buffalo last year. So we'll see what he really has this year, because he didn't really get a full season. So I'm not exactly sure, how that's going to work out. But I feel like Joe Brady, he doesn't have a lot of talent, but I thought he did like a lot with what he had last year in Buffalo. He has Josh Allen, so that obviously helps. But in terms of like, I thought he upgraded the offensive line. I thought he upgraded the run game. He was obviously awesome at LSU. And he was very underrated his first year in Carolina. I just think things went wrong in Carolina. It wasn't the best offense, wasn't the best quarterback situation, wasn't the best head coach he was working for. Now I feel like he's going to have a new, fresh approach, and I definitely feel like he deserves to be on this list. I just feel like, it's just hard to evaluate him, sort of. At number 8, Ken Dorsey. I don't know about that one. I don't really see how he's proven to be number 8. In my opinion, I don't really have anything other to say other than, Brady's better than him. That's all I have to say. I guess Bills fans can kind of contribute to that conversation. I think that he is not deserving of the top 10. At number 9, Greg Roman, who just got hired by the Chargers and sat out last season. The one thing I'll say about Greg Roman is 9 is a good ranking because he's consistently putting together good offenses. Specifically, he's an elite run game coordinator, but he doesn't know how to get them over the top. He doesn't know how to get them playoff wins. He struggles with drop back passing game. He struggles with modern passing concepts, in my opinion, and he limits the upside of passing the football, which that's just tough. Like, you've got to be better in that area. So for me, Greg Roman, probably not top 10, but close enough because he's so good in one area. It's just that he's proven time after time after time that he has limited a team's passing game. So at number 9, Greg Roman. At number 10, Drew Petzing. Very interesting pick. I really like Drew Petzing. I think he is on the rise as a big-time play caller in this league. Love his inclusion on this list. Loved the Cardinals' offense late last year. I thought he did a phenomenal job with the run game especially. So I like that inclusion. So Ken Dorsey, Greg Roman might be removed. Shane Waldron feels too high. Kellen Moore is probably too high. I think they got number 1 right. I'd move Slowick maybe to 2. I'd move... Smith is fine at 5. I think Brady will be better than 7 this year, but I understand it. Petzing, I think, will be better than 10 this year, but I understand it. So looking at offensive coordinators who are not on the list, Zach Robinson is new, but I have high expectations for him. Right? We've got... Who else here? Brian Schottenheimer maybe could deserve to be on this list. He did a great job in Dallas last year, and I kind of do wonder. He was good with Mark Sanchez a long time ago in the Jets, I remember. He's kind of had an up-and-down career, though. He's been an assistant large portion of his career. Joe Lombardi, I should say, is not a very good coach. Brian Schottenheimer, I think he's debatably top 10. Debatably top 10 for me. Jim Bob Cooter wouldn't be on my list. Press Taylor wouldn't be on my list. Matt Nagy, I think you could include on the list. I think he's a decent offensive coordinator. He's not a great one. He's obviously dependent on Mahomes and Reed. That being said, though, the Chiefs did decline as an offense, losing Eric Bieniemy. So I'm not sure. I actually think Luke Getsy is extremely underrated. I thought what he did with Justin Fields, given the limited upside of Justin Fields, the limited ability as a passer, I thought he did a lot of good things with DJ Moore, with that offensive line, with the run game. I thought that he did a good job last year. Luke Getsy is an underrated name at the offensive coordinator position. Frank Smith definitely should be on the list. I understand that Mike McDaniel calls the plays, but Frank Smith has done a great job there. So I would put him on the list for sure. I don't know too much about Wes Phillips, not going to lie. Alex Van Pelt excited about in New England, but there's not a lot of information on him as a play caller. I really like Mike Kafka. I just feel like he has terrible personnel that holds him back, but he's debatably top 10 for me just for what he did in 2022 alone. Clint Kubiak is not bad. Nathaniel Hackett's terrible. Ryan Grubb has a lot of potential. Liam Cohen is new. Cliff Kingsbury is back. So, yeah, there's not a lot of choices, but Frank Smith is the obvious one. I would say Schottenheimer for what he did with Dallas last year. And I think Zach Robinson, I'm probably already putting him in top 10. I've never even seen it before, but I just have a good feeling about him. So, I would move out Ken Dorsey, maybe move down Moore and Waldron and put those guys in. But overall, there's not a lot of choices at offensive coordinator because so many of them are head coaches now. So, yeah, we're going to learn about some guys this year. All right, guys, that's it. If you want me to rank the top 10 offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators in the sport today, and if you want my top 32, Gronk spike the like button. We'll get 100 likes on the best assistant coaches in football. Why not? Let's do it. Maybe we'll just make it assistant coaches since there's a lot of coordinators that we don't really know about. We could do, secondary coaches, O-line coaches, D-line coaches. There's a lot of guys that deserve recognition that I don't feel get it, especially O-line coaches, D-line coaches that are very valuable to their teams that never really lose their jobs or leave. So 100 likes, guys. We'll get that video for you. Thank you for watching. It's Mitch, and we'll see you soon. Peace.